Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Cemetery Club. We are starting different seasons, which has 4 different novellas inside, so there will be at least one video per novella. And this is the Stephen King Library Edition. Gorgeous illustration. I love that it is a seasonal theme. I really am into each season being represented in my life. I don't know why. I've always been that way. I like things to go through a full yearly cycle with 4 distinct seasons. The very first thing in different seasons is the spring season. So we have Hope Springs Eternal, Rita Hayworth, and the Shawshank Redemption. And for a long time, I didn't know that it was Rita Hayworth in the Shawshank Redemption because I watched the movie as a very young teen, and that's just what I assumed the story would be called. So I did watch the movie first. Amazing movie. I love that movie. The casting is brilliant. They followed the story perfectly. This story is narrated by an inmate named Red, and he has been at Shawshank for, I think, 30 years. 40 years. He killed his wife, and by accident, he killed a woman and her child. Red had rigged the car to not be able to brake, and he didn't realize his wife was going to pick up some people and drive them, so a mother and her child were also killed, so he got 3 life sentences. Andy Dufresne, he arrives not long after Red. He arrived in 1948. He had been convicted of killing his wife and her lover. The trial was sensational and sordid. Lots of details came out, lots of things that Andy couldn't account for, but the jury convicted because it all lined up perfectly in such a way that it was kind of difficult to believe him. And part of that was he was like a Vulcan on the stand. He was so removed and clinical, and he just had this air of being a robot, and people did not receive that well. They wanted him to be more emotional, they wanted him to be more upset that his wife was dead, that kind of thing. So early in 1948, Andy approaches Red because he is the guy who can get you anything in prison, and men who need things deal with Red. That is just the way it's done. He's really good at his job, and the guards kind of look the other way. Occasionally they will put their foot down and he'll do a stint in the solitary confinement area, and then he's allowed to operate after that. And he even said that the guards need to kind of be in on it in order for his job to work. So Andy asks for a rock hammer because he wants to play around with rocks, stones, gems. Later, Andy asks for a poster of Rita Hayworth, and he's very embarrassed when he asks. He seems kind of edgy and not his normal self, and Red kind of ascribes it to him being embarrassed over the fact that he wants a poster of a sexy lady and that it's likely masturbatory material for him, and it makes him feel just kind of like a teenager and very uncomfortable. So Red procures the poster for him, and then over the course of Andy's years in prison, he replaces the poster as needed, and so he goes through a whole bunch of women from the different eras. Andy has been very troubled by the sisters. They are a gang kind of that goes around the prison, and they like to show their dominance over everyone. He is sexually assaulted multiple times and over the course of years, until finally it just kind of abruptly stops. Andy oversteps. He overhears a conversation that a guard is having about how he has gotten a windfall of $35,000, and he is concerned that he's going to have to pay so much tax on it that it's not, well, he does complain about it. He makes it sound like that's the worst thing ever. I mean, at least he's getting some money. So Andy overhears it. He steps up and he's like, hey, if you trust your wife, you can leave that money to her as a gift, and the IRS can't touch it. There's a one-time thing with that, I'd be happy to draw up the papers for you, and, you can mail it out, and that's it. So after that, he became kind of like a pet. He was a useful tool his banking skills, because he was a banker in his former life, his banking skills are going to help him stay afloat and stay out of trouble. So this gives Andy a twofold success. He gets put into the library instead of having to work in the laundry room. He gets protection from the sisters. So Andy takes over as librarian in 1952, and he is the librarian for 23 years after that. And the warden and the guards and other prisoners use his services, and he just has become super useful to them. Quote, so there was a need for Andy's services. They took him out of the laundry and installed him in the library. But if you wanted to look at it another way, they never took him out of the laundry at all. They just set him to work washing dirty money instead of dirty sheets. Pages 42 to 43. So then we get a very interesting turn of events. Tommy Williams is a young inmate who hears about Andy's story, and he finds out that the lover that Andy killed was someone that he had heard about from another inmate in another prison, and this guy had bragged about killing him. So he is ready to corroborate that Andy's story is true, that he did not kill his wife and her lover, and he was framed, and, you know, the real person is still out there. So the warden refuses to entertain the idea, and he won't allow Andy to pursue it. And Andy kind of freaks out. He gets stuck in solitary because he starts yelling and getting very, very emotional, which is not his typical behavior. And we find out later that the warden didn't want Andy to pursue this because he felt Andy was smug. He felt he was high and mighty. He walked around prison with his spirit unbroken. He always had hope. He just was a pleasant person. He didn't have that broken spirit that all the other inmates seemed to get after a while, and he wanted to crush Andy. He wanted to crush him. He wanted him broken, defeated, and humbled. Andy talks to Red in 1967, and we find out he is worth $370,000 because when he went to prison, he had things set up with a friend, and he got a new identity all ready for him. His friend has since died, but there is a safe deposit box with his papers and his stocks and bonds inside. He can't access it until he gets out of prison, but it is there waiting for him. And the key to the safe deposit box, stone fence in a field in Buxton. His new identity is Peter Stevens. Andy wants to get a little hotel down in Mexico, and he wants Red to help him run it, which I think is so sweet. Andy escapes from Shawshank in 1975. He has been digging all these years in his prison cell behind his poster, whichever poster of the year it is, or several years. He would keep them for several years. Escaped through a sewer pipe. It crushed the warden, which is good because the warden had wanted to crush Andy, so serves him right. And once Andy escaped, no one knew what became of him. No one heard from him again until Red got a blank postcard, and he knew it was Andy. And then we have the postscript to this story, where Red has finally been paroled. He's old enough now that they deemed him, to be fit to re-enter society. So he's on parole. He's gotten a job at some sort of a little grocery store. And in his free time, he goes around the countryside and looks for Andy's rock, where the key was hidden. And eventually he finds it. It was a very distinct black volcanic rock, so it looked out of place. So that's how Red knew it was there. And he had a couple other landmarks that Andy had told him existed. And he picks the rock up just to feel it, just see that it's real, and to, to hold it. There's a letter addressed to him in a plastic bag to protect it from the elements, and it's from Andy. Quote, I will be keeping an eye out for you. Remember that hope is a good thing, Red, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. Page 100. And then the letter also contains 20 $50 bills. And it's touching. It touches Red. He's so hopeful. He's talked about how he's an institutionalized man and how being in prison actually becomes something that you appreciate for your life. the regimen, everyone telling you what to do, you become dependent on that, and then once you get out, it's hard for you to exist. And he had been contemplating doing something to get himself sent back to prison, just so he could have that security of routine. And so this letter is just beautiful because it allows him to hope again. It allows him to want to have a future. It gives him something to look forward to. So he is going to ditch out on his parole and head down to Mexico. Quote, I hope Andy is down there. I hope I can make it across the border. I hope to see my friend and shake his hand. I hope the Pacific is as blue as it had been in my dreams. I hope. Page 101. So that is The Shawshank Redemption. I love that story so much. There's nothing supernatural in it. To me though, it fits in a long line of movies that I like. Obviously, The Shawshank Redemption is a great movie. Escape from Alcatraz is a really good Clint Eastwood movie. Brubaker, that's one where Robert Redford goes undercover. He's the new prison warden and he wants to see how inmates are treated. That's a great one. Even The Great Escape, which is about POWs during World War II, and they tunnel out and they feel it's their duty to escape enemy prisons. And so that's a really great one too. Actually, that might be my favorite of all those movies, The Great Escape. So I would highly recommend that one. But I think Stephen King is kind of pigeonholed sometimes as a horror writer, but he does such a good job with making you feel for his characters that a simple story like this with just, two real main characters, you just really, really feel for them, you really root for them, and he just elicits so much emotion from you, and I find it to be probably my favorite in this book. So in different seasons, I would probably say Shawshank is my favorite, then The Body, then Apt Pupil, and then The Breathing Method. So that is how I would rank all of them. And next week we will start discussing Apt Pupil. Have a spooky day.